Welcome back to Wealth of Words. We crack open fascinating reads and see what treasures spill out. I'm Richard, your co-host for this intellectual adventure.
And I'm Isabella, delighted to join you on this journey through the pages of knowledge.
Tonight we're diving into Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational, a book that really flips the script on how we think about decision making. We all like to think we're pretty rational, making logical choices based on, well, logic.
But Ariely argues that we're actually quite predictably irrational.
Exactly. And this isn't about random, chaotic irrationality. Ariely highlights these fascinating patterns in our illogical choices, and understanding them can be a real game changer in how we approach, well, pretty much everything.
If you're ready to have some of your assumptions challenged, grab your thinking caps, settle in, and join us as we explore the quirks of the human mind. And hey, if something really resonates with you, hit that follow button and let us know your thoughts. We love hearing from our fellow Wealth of Words enthusiasts.
Okay, Isabel, let's kick things off with one of Ariely's most famous examples, the Economist subscription options. What's the story here?
This is a classic illustration of the decoy effect. The Economist offered three subscription options: online only, print only, and a combined print and online package. Now, logically, you'd think people would just choose the option that best suited their needs, right?
Yeah, that's what a perfectly rational human would do.
But here's where it gets interesting. The print-only option, priced the same as the combined package, acted as a decoy. It was never meant to be a popular choice. It was there to make the print and online bundle seem like an incredible steal.
Hold on, so you're telling me they intentionally included an option that seems like a bad deal just to make the other option look better? That's sneaky.
Exactly. It's all about manipulating our perception of value. We often don't know what we want until we see it compared to something else. Think about the last time you bought a coffee. Did you go for the medium size, even though a small would have been enough, just because the large seemed outrageously priced? That's the decoy effect in action.
Oh man, they got me. I fall for that all the time. So how do we avoid being tricked by these decoys?
The key is to step back and evaluate the actual value of each option, not just its perceived value in comparison to others. Do you really need that extra large coffee, or are you just reacting to a cleverly designed menu?
Great advice. We need to learn to outsmart those marketing ninjas. Okay, let's move on to another intriguing concept, the allure of free. I mean, who doesn't love free stuff?
Right, but Ariely digs into the psychology behind our obsession with free. He even found that people would choose a free item over a slightly better one that costs just a penny. It's like our brains short circuit when we see that magic word.
Okay, confession time. I've totally done that too. Remember that time we were at that street fair and they were giving away those tiny kind of stale...
Go grab like 10.
I did, and they weren't even that good, but they were
Yeah.
free. It's like my rational mind just went on vacation.
And that's exactly the point Ariely's making. We get so fixated on the zero cost that we overlook the actual value or lack thereof of what we're getting. He suggests we reframe these free offers in terms of their actual cost. What are we giving up to get this free item, our time, our attention, or maybe even the opportunity to get something better?
So that free cookie might actually be costing me valuable stomach space that could have been used for something delicious, mind blown. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something I found particularly thought-provoking: social norms versus market norms.
This is where things get really interesting. Ariely argues that bringing money into situations where good intentions and social expectations exist can backfire spectacularly.
Yeah, that sounds a bit counterintuitive. Give us an example.
He uses a daycare center that started charging fines for parents who were late picking up their kids. You'd think the fines would encourage people to be on time, right? A classic market norm approach: punishment equals better behavior.
Yeah, that seems pretty logical.
But here's the twist: lateness actually increased after the fines were introduced. Instead of feeling obligated to be on time out of respect for the teachers, parents started seeing it as a transaction. Hey, I'm paying for the extra service of late pickup, so no big deal.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. It's like the fines accidentally shifted the whole dynamic from a social contract to a purely financial one.
Exactly. And this has big implications for how we think about motivation and incentives. Think about your workplace, for instance. Sometimes appealing to people's sense of purpose and shared responsibility is more effective than just throwing bonuses at them.
It's a great point. It's like when you try to pay a friend to help you move, it just feels weird. It changes the whole nature of the relationship. Okay, before we move on, I have to ask, are you ever tempted to use these insights for, let's say, less than noble purposes, like to get a better deal at the farmer's market or something?
Well, let's just say knowledge is power, but I'm mostly interested in using this knowledge to make better choices for myself and to help others do the same.
Fair enough. Okay, let's wrap up this first segment with one more concept that's near and dear to my heart, the IKEA effect. This one's all about ownership
Oh,
bias.
yes. The idea is that we overvalue things we've invested effort into, even if the end result isn't objectively that great. The classic example is assembling furniture from IKEA. You spend hours deciphering those cryptic instructions, battling with Allen wrenches, maybe even shedding a little blood, sweat, and tears. But once that wobbly bookshelf is standing, you feel like you've conquered Everest.
I'm totally guilty. Last year, I built this ridiculously elaborate birdhouse. It took me weeks, and honestly, it looks like something a 5-year-old made out of popsicle sticks. But I still love that thing.
And that's the IKEA effect at work. We attach extra value to things we've put effort into because our ego is tied up in it. We don't want to admit that all that sweat equity might have been a waste.
So is this just about stuff we build, or does it apply to other things too?
It goes way beyond physical objects. Think about ideas, projects you've worked on, even your own beliefs. We tend to overvalue them simply because they're ours. That's why it can be so hard to let go of things even when we know we should.
Wow, you're making me rethink my entire storage unit full of priceless treasures. So what's the takeaway here? How do we overcome this ownership bias?
The first step is awareness when you're selling something, or even just trying to declutter. Recognize that your emotional attachment might be inflating the value you perceive. And on the flip side, you can actually use this bias to your advantage. If you want someone to value something, get them involved in its creation or development, let them personalize it, put their own stamp on it.
That's brilliant. I'm already thinking of all the ways I can encourage people to appreciate my future DIY projects, but we'll have to save that for another time.
Welcome back to Wealth of Words. We're in the middle of exploring Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, a book that's making us question every decision we've ever made.
Well, maybe not every decision, but it definitely shines a light on those quirky mental shortcuts we all take without even realizing it.
Absolutely, and sometimes those shortcuts lead us down some pretty interesting paths. Speaking of paths, have you ever felt like you're wandering through a decision-making maze with just way too many options?
Oh, all the time. It's like standing in front of the cereal aisle at the grocery store. So many
Yeah.
choices, so little time. And don't even get me started on streaming services. I spend more time scrolling through options than actually watching anything.
Well, you're not alone. It turns out there's a psychological reason for that feeling of overwhelm. Ariely calls it the danger of keeping too many options open. He actually did an experiment where participants wasted resources just to keep unnecessary options available, even when it didn't benefit them in the slightest.
So it's not just me being indecisive. There's actual science behind my inability to choose between the Honey Nut Oat Squares and the frosted shredded wheat.
It's not indecision, it's our wiring. We're programmed to avoid closing doors, even if those doors lead to absolutely nowhere. But here's the kicker. This fear of missing out can actually hold us back. We spread ourselves too thin trying to keep all our options open, and we end up accomplishing less.
So what's the solution? How do we escape this tyranny of choice?
Prioritize, my friend. Figure out what truly matters to you and be ruthless about letting go of the rest. It's about simplifying, streamlining, and saying no to all those distractions. Remember, you can't have it all. And trying to do so will likely lead to regret and dissatisfaction, maybe even a pantry full of stale cereal.
Words to live by. So let's say I've successfully navigated the cereal aisle and I'm finally ready to enjoy my breakfast. But now I'm faced with a new dilemma. Does this generic brand cereal actually taste as good as the name brand?
Ah, you've stumbled upon another fascinating concept, the power of expectations. Ariely argues that what we expect to experience can actually influence our perception of reality.
Wait, are you saying that if I believe this generic cereal is just as good as the name brand, it actually will be?
Yeah. It's not quite that simple, but there's definitely something to be said for the power of suggestion. Ariely cites a study where people were given the same wine, but told it was either a $10 bottle or a $50 bottle. They consistently rated the expensive wine as tasting better, even though it was the exact same liquid.
No way. So you're
Yeah.
telling me I could just slap a fancy label on this generic cereal box, convince myself it's some artisanal small batch oat blend, and it'll magically taste better?
It's not magic, it's psychology. Our brains anticipate certain experiences based on the information we're given, and those expectations can color our perceptions sometimes dramatically. It's like going to see a movie that everyone's been raving about. You're primed to love it, so you might overlook flaws that you'd notice in a film you knew nothing about.
Okay, that makes sense. But this expectation thing is starting to make me rethink everything.
All
What
right.
if all this time I've been enjoying things not for their inherent qualities, but because I've been tricked by marketing and my own preconceived notions?
Well, it's not necessarily about being tricked. It's more about recognizing that our experiences are subjective and can be influenced by a whole bunch of factors, including our expectations. The key is to be aware of those influences and to cultivate a healthy dose of skepticism.
So the next time I'm tempted to splurge on a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine, I should ask myself, am I paying for the taste or am I paying for the story?
Exactly. Now you're thinking like a behavioral economist.
Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about my newfound awareness of these irrational tendencies. But now let's dive into a topic that's a bit more uncomfortable. Dishonesty, are we all secretly just waiting for the right opportunity to cheat our way to the top?
Not necessarily. Ariely's research on dishonesty is fascinating because it suggests that most people are willing to cheat a little bit, but only up to a point where they can still maintain a positive self-image. It's like we have this internal moral compass that sets a limit on our dishonesty.
So we're all capable of fudging the numbers a bit as long as we can still look ourselves in the mirror without cringing.
It's more nuanced than that, but the basic idea is that we want to see ourselves as good, honest people, and we'll generally act in ways that are consistent with that self-image. But
Right.
we also have this competing desire to benefit ourselves, even if it means bending the rules a bit. So it's this constant push and pull between our moral compass and our self-interest.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like those little white lies we tell to avoid awkward situations.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that new haircut looks great.
Exactly. We rationalize these small transgressions by saying everyone does it or it's not a big deal. But Ariely's research shows that even these seemingly insignificant acts of dishonesty can have a ripple effect, eroding trust and creating a culture where cheating becomes more acceptable.
So what's the antidote? How do we keep ourselves on the straight and narrow?
Well, Ariely found that simply reminding people of their moral principles can have a powerful effect in one experiment. He asked participants to recall the 10 Commandments before a task, and guess what? Cheating rates plummeted.
Wait, so just thinking about the Ten Commandments made people more honest. I'm starting to think we should print out wallet-sized versions of those and hand them out at tax time.
It might not be a bad idea, but seriously, it highlights the power of subtle reminders by bringing ethical considerations to the forefront of our minds. We can influence our own behavior and the behavior of those around us.
Okay, I'm convinced from now on I'm keeping a copy of the Ten Commandments taped to my computer monitor. Just in case I'm ever tempted to borrow someone's lunch from the office fridge. And speaking of temptation, I think it's time we move on to our final segment.
Okay.
I'm convinced from now on I'm keeping a copy of the Ten Commandments taped to my computer monitor, just in case I'm ever tempted to borrow someone's lunch from the office fridge. But speaking of temptation, I think it's time we move on to our final segment.
And we're back for the final chapter of our deep dive into Predictably Irrational. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, from the subtle power of decoys to the surprising ways our expectations shape our reality.
It's been quite a journey.
It has, but remember, the goal isn't to beat ourselves up for being irrational. It's about understanding those quirks so we can make smarter choices.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to outsmarting our own brains. So as we wrap things up, I want to throw this out to our listeners. What resonated most with you tonight? Was there a particular concept that made you think, oh man, that's totally me?
And even more importantly, how can you apply these insights to your own life? Are there any small changes you can make to your decision-making process to avoid those predictable pitfalls?
Like, think back to that discussion about the decoy effect. The next time you're faced with a choice, whether it's buying a new gadget or choosing a vacation package, take a moment to consider, is there a decoy lurking in the options? Is there something there just to make another choice seem more appealing?
Or maybe you're feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices we face these days. Remember, Ariely's experiment, sometimes closing a few doors can actually free you up to focus on what truly matters. Declutter your mind, declutter your life.
And let's not forget the power of expectations if you find yourself dreading a task or assuming a certain outcome challenge. Those assumptions, could your expectations be coloring your experience? Maybe it's time to adjust your perspective and see things in a new light.
Dan Ariely's work reminds us that we're all wonderfully complex and often irrational creatures, but by embracing our imperfections and understanding the hidden forces that shape our decisions, we can navigate the world with a little more wisdom and a lot more self-awareness.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we want to thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this episode of Wealth of Words. We hope you found it as enlightening and entertaining as we did. If you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. We always love hearing your thoughts. Until next time, keep those pages turning and those minds expanding.